Welcome back. You're still watching Power Breakfast on Citizen TV. With me, Freddy Ndimuli. We continue looking at the headlines this morning with Joy Mdivo, political analyst, Francis Waitito MP Juja, and Anthony Oluoch MP Mathare constituency. It's time to give the two gentlemen, one who's just been re-elected for another term to represent the people of Juja, Francis Waitito. This is your first time since your re-election, Bwana Waitito. This is your first time on this news review panel. Probably give you an opportunity to once again thank the people of Juja before we discuss this politics.
Thank you very much. I want to thank them so much because, you know, Juja, I think, is #1 in the country, cosmopolitan. So we have all the tribes there. That is why I can also I can speak about 3 languages. But looking at what has happened in Juja constituency, we are happy because we had a good panel of members there. And we agreed on what to do. And now I thank them so much for re-electing me. And you know, it was not easy to come back to Parliament this time. I think 35% of us has come back, and the rest are not there.
Okay. Karibu sana, it's good to have you back on this panel. Bwana Anthony Oluoch, you've just been elected MP Mathare. How is that? What are you hoping to do for the people of Mathare?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much, Mathare constituency. It wasn't easy. I've been at it for almost 5 years. I tried first in 2013, then the nomination didn't go well. Of course, the immediate former member of parliament was my protagonist. At the time, the issues about nominations are a matter of discussion for another day. Mathare constituency, just like Juja, is one of those very cosmopolitan constituencies. It's not and with all due respect, it's not one of those Kibra or Raraka where you get a party ticket, ODM, and then you can say, you know, I have been re-elected. You really have to work it out because demographically we have the Kikuyu community who is actually the most popular. So it says a lot for you to be member of parliament from a community that comes third, because my community, if you look at it from that perspective, is I think #3 going into #4. We have the Kamba community, and I thank them very much for the confidence they had in me. We have Somalis there, we have Kisis, we have Merus, and I had to shop for votes from each of those. I had to have a message for each of those, and the most important thing that I had to hammer out was that, look, if I become member of parliament for Mathare, I become member of parliament for everyone, for the Kikuyus, for the Merus, for the Embus, and everybody. And I had a message for them because the 3 most important things that Mathare constituency suffers from, I think one of them key is security. Being a slum area, security, one of those things that you really have to think, how do we fix this? And I looked at them and said, you see, usalama kwanza. The first way to fix it is you must find employment for the young people, because this feeds into insecurity. You really have to look, how do these people get to find a way of living? Number 2 is about the environment and sanitation and access to clean water. This being a slum, we have big huge problems about how do you get people to get just basic access to water. They go without water sometimes on weeks on end. And one of the things I really have to consider is how can we work with county government, with the non-governmental organizations to sink boreholes for people there. And then 3rd is about education. I'm going to give a lot of emphasis to this in the next 5 years. Those 3 things.
And again, being a new member of parliament, it's very important to work closely with their people. Like now in Juja, every Monday I'm in my office.
Correct.
And that is why I was #1 in Central Kenya and #9 in the country.
Correct.
On CDF.
And probably that's why you
because of being advised by
yes.
your people. It's not that you are a member of parliament and think that you
know it all.
And now, gentlemen, because you're here, there's this headline to do with a planned ban on matatus entering the CBD. This is not the first time we're hearing about this, even before we get to the politics. We have a new governor in Nairobi. I know Juja is in Kiambu, but most of those people, even in Juja, do travel to Nairobi quite a lot. Most of them are commuters between the 2 counties. Now, the new plan by Governor Sonko to actually have all the matatus coming into Nairobi terminate their journeys just before getting into the city. This plan has been there before. We've tried it. It has failed. You know, the terminus around Gara, there was even a plan to have matatus stop even before getting to Huru Highway. This time round, do you think simply because we have a new governor that things will change? Joy?
It's one of those things that needs very serious planning, because the reason why previous efforts have failed is you tell the matatus not to enter into the CBD, but you don't have a way of getting that mass of commuters into the city, which is where they need to be, because they're not coming to stay in the outskirts. They need to be in the CBD to work. One of the things that I have failed to understand why legislators have been dilly-dallying with is implementing the banning of smaller motor vehicles and having bigger PSV, so that it is easier on traffic and also it's easier to designate routes. I'm not that young, and fortunately, so I remember the days when you could get into a 59 bus in Umoja and go all the way to Kenyatta and back home. So one bus would serve the people from Umoja getting into town, serve people getting out of town, and out of Kenyatta back into town, and back to Umoja, one bus. But these days, you'll have to get into a matatu to Mudhurwa, get something else into the CBD, get another one into Kenyatta, get another. Those are so many motor vehicles using the same roads. So it's not just a matter of you can't come in here. What alternatives are you giving people? So this time around, I don't see it sticking simply because that alternative plan is not yet clearly in place. Let the infrastructure be done, consultations be done, and then we'll be able to have a shot at this, because we need it. We don't dispute it. We need it.
Yes.
But we need it done in a way that makes sense for everybody.
Governor Sonko has been in office less than 2 months. Do you think he has done enough work to actually effect such a ban, Bonawaitiru?
I think last time when it happened in Nairobi, personally I went to see the governor, Kidero, and I told him, look at it this way. Because people going to Nairobi, you have clearly said from Juja, Thika and other areas around Nairobi, look at the students who go to Nairobi every morning. And then you want to drop them where now he has said, and walk to the central. I mean, it doesn't sound clearly open, and I think Sonko should have consulted more, because if you look at what is happening, even the security of especially women who are walking in the evening after work, when they are walking across Nairobi River to where now he says that they'll catch up with their matatus, it is not very right. I think he should go back again, sit again with his cabinet and again talk about it, because I think somebody has spoken to him and he acted so fast. This is something that requires consultation, and even us as members of parliament, I definitely, at times we talk about it in parliament and we try to advise them, and he's in Nairobi and he's a lawyer and he knows definitely that 80% of our students are the people who go by matatus. They are not driven to the schools. And even now the women who require a lot of security. You know, Nairobi and the security is not very safe, especially Globe Roundabout. You know what has been happening there. Personally, I've been going to the river because I like helping those young boys there, and you see them there, and they are there, and it is too fast to just put those laws that he has just put. Kidero, the governor, tried a bit and didn't work, so I think he should also not try it very fast, although that is what will require in future, but not now.
Yes. And even the way he's decided to go about it, but Olwoch, has there been any consultations with other leaders from the city, for example with you as a legislator from one of the many constituencies in Nairobi? Has there been any kind of consultation even with the governor in terms of how the city can be improved, or this just decisions basically from City Hall without consulting any other person?
Yeah, I think a lot of consultation is needed as a member of parliament, and even if you leave that aside, we have a lot of stakeholders. I just saw this on news, and it's not one of those things that you wake up one day and say, you know, oh, your lives have changed, you're going to be dropped at Mudhurwa or at Globe Roundabout. There are security issues around this thing. There are people's livelihoods about it. The Matatu people certainly were going to throw tantrums about it. I think there was need for sufficient consultation by the governor. But secondly, we have to look at this about it in terms of the politics of it as well. It's just like the issue about hawkers in town. Our leaders play politics with it. When it's time to do something popular, they say, look, we're going to do this. It's the right thing. And business people in town think it's the very right thing, you're going to do it. We said one time we're going to ban these 14-seater matatus. Where did that issue go? And if you're going to ban 14-seater matatu, what was put in place? I think the long-term solution to this is to have a conference around it. Are we going to change the infrastructure of Nairobi so that we think about these light underground trains? I don't know how much it's going to cost, but if you've been to developed countries with well-networked infrastructure, if you're going to drop at GPO from Juja, you just go and buy a ticket and you pop up underground right in front of your office. I think long-term, this is what is going to solve this issue. We need to start thinking about the planning around how do we reconfigure Nairobi. There was a plan also about let's move Nairobi towards Machakos or towards Juja. Let's look for space so that we decongest the city. Not everybody needs to come into Nairobi. I think there is need for a conference, a Nairobi conference.
And this probably is beyond even the county government, surely, because it is a capital city of Kenya, and probably such discussions are even beyond the county government. Joy?
I like that suggestion of having a Nairobi conference, because Nairobi problems is one of those things that one affects others. And looking at an issue in isolation, because now you might think I'm looking at solving traffic problems, but what you're looking at is access to government facilities and government offices. You're looking at access to hospital, you're looking at access to schools. There are schools in town, Moi Avenue Primary, the school at Basilica. So it's one of those things where if you have a multi-sectoral approach and you have a stakeholders forum where you listen to everybody and come up with a plan together. Now, the problem we have in this city is one of not just poor planning, but in the implementation of the laws we already have and flouting of the rules over the years has meant that we have got layers of problems. And therefore, even what Mheshimiwa Oloch was talking about, having a sort of moving some of the critical facilities from out of the CBD to a place where the planning can be done correctly, and then we follow the rules. Look at something simple like this plastic bag ban. We've been talking about it for years. The environment has suffered a lot, but it's something simple. Not the plastic is not the problem. It's the people who cannot dispose of it correctly, who cannot manufacture to standard correctly. We are our own enemies sometimes. And so I think as a people also we need to take some responsibility. Look, we are not very disciplined with our traffic lights. We are not very disciplined with following our rules. Let us have a coming to self, so that when we plan moving forward, we plan with posterity in mind.
Look at what happened yesterday when the new governor of Kiambu came in. There is Waitito like me, although we are not related. He comes there yesterday, and I was in my house. My house is about 300 meters from the superhighway. I've lived in Juja for the last 32 years. He comes with tractors just because he is a friend to the Kenya Mpya bus guys. He comes and with tractors from the county, the government, and removes all those plans for the national government the way they did the road. And then he's putting up a bus station there, at Juja. And you can't put a bus station at Juja because what is there is drop and pick. You're not supposed to put it, because now I saw when I was coming here, the Kenya Mpya buses were all now there. And we have a university there, we have students going to school and everything. Now you are putting, who told him that? I was very mad about it when I saw it this morning.
It just goes to show that there's very little talking between these levels of leadership. The legislators, representatives from different levels, and the governors. There's simply no talking. People just come in, even with the excitement of election, and they just want to work. Anyway, with regard to this ban on matatus from the CBD, the announcement comes barely a day after Governor Mike Sonko directed that all public service vehicles carrying less than 60 passengers will not be allowed into the CBD starting this Wednesday. Yes, that's a headline. We wait to see what will happen. Now let's talk about the big headlines today, and it has to do with this repeat presidential election that we still do not know whether or not it will take place on October 17th. The headlines seem to suggest that that could be changing. On Daily Nation page 5, The headline reads, repeat poll date may be changed today. But yes, maybe by the end of today, it will no longer be October 17th. You realize we even stopped the countdown on our ticker down there, because counting days up to October 17th. Things appear they could be different. But the bigger question, and probably the bigger question that we should be asking is, are we going for elections? Anthony will watch, because I see quite a lot happened yesterday, and if I may just start reading the headlines. Raila says Uhuru wants to be president for life. That's on page 6. US pushes for Uhuru-Raila election talks. That's on page 4 of the Daily Nation. Raila in fear of defeat, says Tuju. That's on page 5 of the Daily Nation. You come to the Standard, similar headlines. I do not know which one to look at, which one to leave. There will be no polls in October, says NASA leaders. This was somewhere in Kisumu. Yes, former Jubilee Point man Onyango Lo says, speaking in Kisumu, said the reins of leadership will have to be taken over by a caretaker government led by Chief Justice David Maraga, who will then oversee the repeat presidential elections. That story is on page 8 of the Standard. Yes. Same page, NASA says no election without reforms. Raila launches an all-out assault on poll agency. The next page, Raila plotting to disrupt poll. That's according to Deputy President William Ruto. Now this, just go towards pointing, even the next page, page 10, Jubilee claims NASA out to sabotage poll. Question, and let's start with you, Bon Anthony, you'll watch. Do you think we're going to have elections in October? Leave alone this date of 17th, but do you think we're going to have elections?
Ideally, what the law says is that Article 140, that when an election is invalidated as it was, an election ought to take place within 60 days. Let's go back to what the Supreme Court said. I know tomorrow Supreme Court will be giving its considered judgment. But in its initial judgment, the short version of the judgment, they say two things. One, that elections were misconducted. They were not done in accordance with the law. And then they directed IEBC to conduct fresh elections in strict compliance with the law. And I think this is where we miss the point. It's not just another election. That election was already adjudged to have been very, very badly managed. So the question that we ought to ask, with the same mechanism, the same system, the same infrastructure, the same personnel, we don't know what Supreme Court will say tomorrow, but assuming for the sake of argument that the Supreme Court indicts or puts in very adverse lights Chiloba, Kasaiti, all these people that have been mentioned by NASA in the public media. Assuming tomorrow it is said that these people have personal responsibility and criminal action must be taken against it, can we still say that you're going to have an election with them? And this is what NASA has been saying. Unfortunately, both these teams have been talking on top of the mountain. And when somebody said, you know, we may need to come around the table, like we have done very many times before. When this country has been in a crisis, people have sat down. But the situation you have now is that there will be an election, mupende musipende, and of course NASA will say, as it is entitled to, that there will be no election. In fact, they're saying, we are not going to boycott, there will be no elections. And they have a point, because the Constitution contemplates an election that is done in accordance with it. And that's the argument that we put at the Supreme Court.
Bonatito.
Yeah.
Listening to Bonal Watch, you get the feeling, and just looking at the headlines, that yes, probably what politicians have been saying, that NASA is probably not very keen on this election. It looks more and more that yes, October may come and go and still no election.
Of course, I think what has happened, and now we are back in Parliament, and IBC was put in place by Parliament. And I think what they are saying and what they are following is what is in the Constitution. But now, what happened is that there was a general election, and everybody from MCAs to members of Parliament, senators and governors, all were sworn in. And that, now they say they are in government. Only what happened is the presidential elections. And it's not that we were very happy about the president, because when we won by 1.4 million votes, and he went and said, yeah, I want to go back to elections, he never consulted anybody. And you know, we have our own party. He never consulted anybody, but he was fighting for peace. And he's giving us reasons when he called all of us and he said, I want to tell you that unless I go back to elections, we might find this country into crisis. And that is not what I want. Look at Kenya. I think it's another number 4 now, a country that has gone back to this kind of elections again, and in the world. And what we are looking and seeing now today, because even other people have come to parliament, other members of parliament, we are talking, and definitely what is happening, and I'm always telling people, the system that we have in Kenya today is pure presidential system. We don't have opposition, and that is why when we sit in parliament, we talk as one. And when we have committees in parliament, it is the same committee that go and talk. I only find opposition when now we are doing campaigns. But after that, there is no opposition in this country like before. Everybody is in government. Whether you are independent, whether you are in ODM, whether you are in which party, we are all one and same. And then what we should look at this time round is not for the country to stand still. Today's have not slept, because time like now, we issue bursaries to all the students from poor families, and the country moves on. And what people don't know now, the country will come to stand still. Whether we take another time to wait for elections, there is no money, even in parliament. I mean, we are not even in any committee, but we are only there in parliament.
It looks more and more like, yes, October will come and go and still no election. Joy Mdivo, do you think we're going to go to the polls?
We have to go to the polls, and we have to go to the polls for the simple reason that Kenyans deserve to have an end to these shenanigans. It has to come to an end. 2017 has been a year when we have done nothing else but politics. And now I'm talking like a Kenyan. We've gotten to a place where this matter has got to be concluded, and concluded well. Because when we come to a place as a people where we can do nothing else but politics, then there is something wrong. We have to be able to move forward in a manner that makes sense. Mheshimiwa Oloch has made a very important point, that there's a ruling that is coming out tomorrow, and in that ruling we will know exactly what parameters, what level of illegalities, what level of irregularities. And what we have seen from the political parties the last 2 weeks is they've each been talking at each other as if they already know what's in the ruling, and making all manner of suggestions that has hyped up the tension. Look at what is happening in Kisumu right now. People have tension, and there's nothing to have tension over. I was looking at the women whose houses were burnt, and they're saying now, whose visitor will we be to make one attention tangu satisa? And now this is something that our politicians need from both sides of the divide. When you want to keep your core engaged, and you do it by means of sensationalizing issues that nobody even knows what exactly we are talking about, we are not doing the Kenyans a favor. One thing we also have to remember is that if we do not go to the polls by 2nd of November, then we will be moving in uncharted waters. And that constitutional crisis is again something that we don't need at this stage in our lives, because if we already have county governments working, we already have the legislature working, we have to conclude this one race so that the rest of the country can move forward. And a discussion has to be had also about separating the other 5 races from the presidential one, because we have to get to a place where there has to be a balance, because what we have now is not a proper situation for a country to be in.
But on watch, your colleagues are already talking about a caretaker government, and I'm quoting the headline on page 8 of the Standard. It looks like that is what they're already seeing, that yes, because they're even suggesting that the caretaker government led by Chief Justice David Maraga, the conversation has really progressed to even that point of thinking who will actually head that caretaker government. Why is this?
I'll go back to the point that I made earlier. The Constitution dictates that we have an election within 60 days. But let's face it, a situation may arise where Kenyans may need to start having that conversation. What if the infrastructure and the environment within which to conduct that fresh election is not there. We may need to start thinking about what do we deal with that constitutional crisis, because those are things that we need to anticipate. And that's when you're hearing people say, let's start thinking caretaker. It is not important to go to the elections for the sake of having an election. The Supreme Court has spoken. This election was flawed. We cannot go to another election because we want to move on with our lives. And I understand the conversation around this, that we cannot be politicking the whole year. But we could have fixed this if IEBC conducted the election in the manner it ought to have done. So, rather than going to an election, and then after the 17th of October, we are back to where we began from the Supreme Court, we'd rather wait. We'd rather do 3 months, have a caretaker government, and we're not saying this is what we want to do as NAPA. It's important that people understand us. We are saying we still have time. It's like 21 days, 20-something days. If tomorrow a judgment comes and clearly says so and so and so and so, you are responsible for where we are today. Those guys cannot stay in office. We cannot have an election under those circumstances. Yet they will save this country time. Yes. They will save us money. They are the ones who will bring down this tension.
Yet, even without the privilege of having gone through the judgment that we're still waiting for, the written judgment by the Supreme Court, NASA has already gone ahead and made demands that this is what these are the irreducible minimums, not even based on what the Supreme Court made the judgment on. What if they say something different was the problem?
I think NASA is making its demands based on hard positions that have been taken by the President and his deputy. Look, barely hours after the judgment was made, the President was already talking on top of everybody, calling everybody names. The IEBC itself ought to have brought these temperatures down by saying, look, let's come down and come to a table. We're waiting for this judgment, but in the meantime, what can we do to bring back the confidence levels? IEBC has a duty. That duty, they have not used it properly. One, they call you for meeting with predetermined outcomes. They come and ambush you with memos saying we've already given Al Ghurair the printing documents. No consultations about the date of the elections, and I know they have this independence thing, but it could have helped if IEBC said, everybody, please put down your condition, let's come to the table. Instead, what do? Chebukati gives his 12-point memorandum to Chiloba. We don't know whether those Chiloba issues have been addressed. We have an IEBC back saying we are now united. We are not going to have this election in the circumstances. Let's face it, we may not have an election.
Wow. But Francis Waititu, how does that make you feel that yes, there's a possibility that we are not going to have elections, yet we're still counting the days?
I think we have done the best that we could, because if you remember, even IBC was supposed to be in the whole parliament, but if you look at it, what happened, there is 6 of them who are, 6 members of parliament from each side who went and sat down, and we didn't interfere because the president said we don't, and they gave those 12 people time to go and sit down and even change the officers, the IBC officers, and we were not very happy about it, because you know, if you give somebody a job, also give them time to do their work. But the president told us no, we have to give them a chance, let them sit down, because the other side are also Kenyans like us, and we agreed on to it. Now this is a new team that now also are being told are not doing the right job. But if you look at what happened in the general elections and the outcome and the machines that were being operated during elections, even now the report is there. He says nothing wrong happened. But now the Chief Justice, who we can't call in Parliament, that is the only body that we can't call and ask questions in Parliament. But IBC we can call them, but judiciary we can't call them to ask them. That is where now we are wrong at. Chief Justice said he's a human being like you and me, but he said who knows law, but he said, but we haven't seen any panel of lawyers or anybody trying to say whether he said it that we have to go back to elections, we haven't had anybody in judiciary sitting down and talking about what the Chief Justice said. It is there, he said it, and it's because there was that panel there. What we need to know is that actually what is happening in the country is not right, and what we are looking at now is to see that according to the Constitution, my friend here from Mheshimiwa from Mathare have just said it here, that it is there in the Constitution about the 60 days that we must go back for elections. If the president had said no, I won and I'm not going back for elections, then would have been thinking otherwise. But now he said, okay, if that is what the court have said, that is exactly what I'll do.
Okay.
And you know how he has gone through elections. You know how painful it can be if we are now announcing a member of parliament for Mathare, then somebody says you didn't win. It's not easy game.
We have to ask ourselves this question: can we afford? Seriously, let's think about it. Can we afford another stolen election? Can we afford another bungled and mismanaged elections? If we do, we may set this country into a path of irreparable disaster. And that's why you're hearing people say that at that point, then let's start thinking whether this union is working. I am not persuaded myself that we need to get there. But people are seriously starting to think about this. A few minutes ago when we came into the show, we were talking about marriage and about certificates. But at some point when those marriages and those certificates don't work, at some point somebody needs to start asking, is it time for me to walk out of this marriage?
Wow. But what we need to have that conversation. What we know is
so that's why I'm insisting. It's not just about another election. We are saying in Kiswahili, for us to translate, sio tu atibora uchaguzi, tunataka uchaguzi bora.
And if we get
if we get into a serial process of elections stolen after another election stolen.
I want him to agree. I want him to agree that we had even international observers.
Those observers have now gone back and apologized.
Let's allow the lady who's sitting in the
sorry about it, we have taken sorry.
Have we set the bar too high?
You know, these politicians behave as if yes, I think politics is the be-all and end-all of everything. I've listened to Mheshimiwa Oluoch and I've listened to Mheshimiwa Waititu, and you know both of them are saying the exact same thing but in different terms. Each of them want a process that is above board, that Kenyans can believe in, that will bring...
Is that even possible? Because that's a question
yes,
we need to
that
ask.
will bring an outcome that makes sense.
With the kind of demands that are being made by NASA, do you think they're achievable and we still go for elections? Because probably we're setting the bar too high so that we do not have elections.
And that's the point I was coming to make. Each of us wants a process that we believe is going to be credible as far as we are concerned. What we need to have is not a process that is subjective to the NASA standard of standard quality of the standard mark of NASA demands, or the standard mark is the Jubilee demands. We need to have a process that is what the Kenyans have said, this is the standard, this is what we are happy with. And that is what we have in the laws. And the laws have said this matter has to be concluded one way or another within the next 60 days. And the politicians need to understand it's Kenyans who said that through the Constitution and through their legislators. And that is something that all politicians should be working towards, because they are not going into politics to lead goats. They're going into politics to lead us. And we have to be part of the equation, whichever way you go. That is one. Secondly, the court, when they were making their abbreviated judgment, stated very clearly that within 60 days you're going to have an election, and it's the IEBC that is going to conduct this election. That to me tells me, from where they stood with what they had at that point in time, they were confident that this IEBC is able to actually deliver. All they needed to do was follow the strict letter of the law. Does the law exist? Yes. Is Chebukati a lawyer? Yes. Can he follow simple laws? Yes. That tells you, therefore, the problem is not the IEBC as presently constituted. It's the willingness for everybody to play by the rules that are already put in the law. Now, when we look at the politicians making demands, you can understand where they're coming from. And one thing I've been on record saying, we need to learn to separate the important from the urgent. Are reforms in the IEBC necessary? electoral reforms are necessary, that is true, everybody agrees to it. But within the next 30 days, can we have substantive reforms to guarantee a credible election? That is something that is impossible to do. Why? The timeline is not only so short. If you make such critical changes in this particular space of time, the possibility of making a mistake and ending up with another bungled election is higher than if you police the current IBC and tell them, look, we're watching you, these are the laws, follow them to the letter, and then deliver a credible election. The other point I want to make is that when we are looking at the current scenario where we are, it is important for us to remember that all this thing is costing Kenyans money. It's not coming for free. Our economy right now is in a depressed state. We're also looking at another 25 billion that's going to work towards this election. And when the IBC has asked for this money, it's not just the IBC that needs this money. It's all the other people who are working towards it. It's the police, it's the extra security, it's the children staying out of school. If they're going to go to school to stay for an extra 1 week, to keep children in school an extra 1 week is more money. What this quagmire is costing the country is so much more. Let me put this into context. When you're looking at, for example, the American situation, there was the allegation that the Russians were involved and that there was hacking. What have the Americans done? You go ahead, you swear your president, and then now you take time looking at the scrutiny, one at a time, such that at the end of the day, you find out exactly what happened, exactly who's capable, and when you find who's culpable, then you deal with it then. If we make everything a crisis, we will never be able to be getting to the bottom of what we need to get to, simply because of the rush.
And it looks more and more that like we are headed for a crisis, but there's still a ray of hope. We do understand that the IEBC has invited both the party leaders and presidential candidates, I'm talking about President Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, to a meeting this Wednesday. And the headline on the Daily Nation actually speaks to the same. U.S. pushes for Uhuru-Raila talks over poll. What exactly do we expect these two gentlemen to come to the table and agree on? Is it the demands by NASA? Is it something different? We'll be discussing that when we return. Let's take a break.